Hi everyone, and welcome to the April edition of our monthly news review. I'm James Raddings, Digital Portfolio Lead here at DCD, and today we'll be talking about what's been happening in our industry over the last month or so, and it's fair to say that there's quite a lot. I'm joined by some members of our editorial team who are the people behind the headlines and articles on our website. They also talk to the industry on a daily basis, and we also let them go to a few events as well. So we've got Seb Moss, who's our editor and publisher, Paul Lipscomb, who's our telecoms editor, and Charlotte Truman, who's our compute, storage, and networking editor. So starting with yourself, Charlotte, what have you been up to? What have you been hearing? And what have you been writing about?
Yeah, thanks for having me today, James. Like you said, it's been a bit of a busy month. I guess the biggest news is Intel seem to be staging a comeback. They've not been doing super well financially over kind of multiple quarters now. Last year, I think it was, they replaced their CEO and their new chief exec has really, Lip Bhutan has really been kind of trying to turn that boat around and seems to be succeeding. So they published their quarterly Q1 financial results last week with revenues of 13.6 billion, which is pretty significant for them. Because they have been reporting losses. I think it's 5 of the last 7 quarters, revenue was down. So like I said, they seem to be turning it around. A big part of that with Intel is they signed a lot of deals in the last month. Perhaps the biggest and most significant is they are partnering with Elon Musk for his Tesla TeraFab in Texas. So basically, Elon Musk wants to spend 20 billion building this massive chip fab, and he has signed up Intel to join him on that. And after the initial announcement that Intel would be partnering, he went on to announce that they'll be using their 14A chip architecture, which is Intel's kind of most advanced. That's significant because last year it must have been, the Intel CEO said that if they didn't get a customer for this architecture, they might scrap it altogether. They might not move forward with it. So the fact that they've now got Musk and Tesla on board is quite significant there.
Although you have to, with any Musk thing, put the big asterisks, right? The big
Yes.
asterisks of, yes, he has delivered a lot of things, but also he has said a lot more, and a lot of those things have not come to pass. Some of the things do, but come many, many, many years later, or and massively, scope back. Cybertruck, super delayed, way more expensive, couldn't drive as far. Starship hasn't hit its deadline. Robotaxi hasn't hit its deadline. And he's muscling in on chip development, which is one of the hardest things known to man. Good luck.
Yeah, I think he initially announced the project at like a Tesla shareholder meeting last year and was just like, I've been thinking loads about chips lately and I'm going to do this. So,
And then there's the added asterisk of SpaceX is trying to go for IPO, and ahead of an IPO, you try and say as many things as possible so that investors get excited. And even though this is Tesla TeraFab, the TeraFab is a combination with SpaceX and XAI, which got bought by SpaceX, and they want to build them in space at some point and then yeet them from the moon into deep space and all kinds of definitely real things.
yeah, I think he said Tesla would be doing like an initial R&D pilot line and then SpaceX will be doing like the long-term chip development.
And of course, Tesla had its own in-house chip development team. They all left. And he was like, we're not doing this chip development. And then 8 months later, he was like, yeah, we're doing chip development.
And they're all back, right? Or some of them are back. The guy
Some of
leading
them
the
are
project
back.
has come back round.
One of the guys that led the project, but one of the other guys that led the different part of the project, it's messy, as with all things Musk.
But exciting for Intel. They seem to be taking it seriously. So perhaps more legitimate partnerships that they've signed. They're collaborating with Samba Nova on their new inference chip. Also, Google have signed a deal with Intel for a multi-year CPU deployment as well. So yeah, like I said, Intel are kind of really hoovering up in this space lately. On the Google point as well, not only are they partnering with Intel, but they also launched or unveiled the 8th generation of their TPU hardware. And most significant thing about this is they're actually releasing 2 chips, one dedicated for training and one for inference. Everyone's trying to make their own inference chips. Everyone loves inference. Everyone is jumping on that bandwagon, including Google. So yeah, they've decided to of their next release, like I say, dedicated training and a dedicated inference chip. And they've also announced that they're going to continue working with Broadcom in the foreseeable future for the development of those chips as well.
Yeah, the differentiation between sort of training and inferencing is interesting, and in the broadcast division, we've seen that those conversations split. The industry seems to be waking up to the fact that they are fundamentally different. How are you seeing that, and are you seeing that differentiation is penetrating a lot of the market, or is it still being included in the same breadth of conversation?
Oh, like since kind of the start of this year, maybe even like earlier, inference is dominating the conversation. So many companies are looking to develop their own inference specific hardware, like CPUs. The demand for CPUs has kind of really come back round. I think Intel and AMD both said earlier this year that Intel specifically said they were kind of caught off guard by the resurgence in demand for CPUs and are now having to work really hard to kind of shore up that supply. I think AMD said in certain markets that kind of getting your hands on their CPUs was going to take a bit longer than like had previously been the case. So yeah, the conversation is really switching towards inference at the moment, and we're seeing that a lot.
And with CPUs, it's agentic AI, right?
Yes.
So you have this, you have the CPU, and then the idea is, do you have this layer of other chips on top? We spoke about last month about obviously the LPU, the Grok chip, which is high speed inference, and then like Charlotte mentioned, all these other companies, she's constantly doing profiles of the thousands of different people that want to take that inference crown. How many of them will actually make it is a big unknown, but going up against Nvidia's big bank balance and Jensen's ability to force people to be his customer, it's gonna be tough. But Google has, TPU is one of the fundamental competitors that actually has a chance. They've been there for a long time. They're not just jumping on with the bandwagon. They've been there pre-boom, and they have the customers and they have themselves as a customer.
Yeah, and we're seeing it across a few of the channels. I mean, I'm a bit biased because I work on the cooling and investment ones, but facilities are now being designed from the chip out as opposed to just building a facility and putting the compute in. And also on the financing side of things, we're seeing a large growth in interest in GPU financing, with that naturally being the most valuable asset on the whole stack. So just bringing Paul, you've been sitting there very patiently. What's going on in the telecoms world?
So yeah, I mean, there's been the usual stuff. There's been 5G launches, a bit of talk about 6G, AI, the future technologies. But I think the one thing that's really caught my mind and caught my attention is the stuff around the satellites. And I know Seb's a massive fan of satellites. He's always gone on about it, right? But the big one I'd say in April was Amazon announcing that they're going to acquire satellite operator Globalstar for 11.57 billion, which is quite a big deal. For them, it will probably position themselves as a bit more of a rival to SpaceX. I know Amazon have big ambitions with their Amazon Leo constellation. I think they've got plans to eventually deploy 3,200 there or thereabouts. So yeah, it should be interesting to see if that does happen. Globalstar, they have been around for quite a while. Apple actually took a stake in them, I think 20% stake in them a couple of years ago. So as part of the deal, Amazon and Apple have announced an agreement for Amazon Leo to power satellite services for iPhone and Apple Watch services, including emergency SOS via satellite. So that seems to be one of the big parts of that deal. I suppose so. SpaceX have dominated this area really when it comes to satellites. The purpose of these constellations is to not replace terrestrial mobile networks, but to provide coverage in areas where it's pretty much impossible to put a mobile tower or put fibre in the ground. So it is a really interesting segment of the market, and it was a huge theme at MWC this year of the satellite providers and players. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see as many of them as I'd like to this year. But yeah, they were everywhere. So I think it's something we're going to see more of. The deal itself will still need to be approved, but I think something like 58% of Global Star's shareholders have accepted the deal. So that seems pretty positive. But it'd be interesting to see, if this does give Amazon the footing to, really compete with SpaceX. I know SpaceX have actually been a little bit irritated by Amazon recently because Amazon have applied for an extension for their deployment requirements. They're initially supposed to deploy 1,600 satellites. I think by the end of June. It's coming up. The deadline's coming up soon, and SpaceX and their filing to the FCC were quite keen to point out that they are still, I think, 1,300 short of that, and they've tried to get an extension for 2028. So it should be interesting to see how that all plays out, really. But yeah, we'll keep good tabs on this for sure.
Staffing problems in the data center world. I haven't heard of that before.
Again, that has a.
Go on, Seb.
So it has an added benefit from Amazon's perspective of, showing that SpaceX has competitors just before SpaceX does an IPO where they want to raise tons of money, which they want to use to build data centers in space. So every penny they can knock off SpaceX's valuation helps them in their fight against SpaceX, be it in space or with Amazon's terrestrial data centers. So it's a well-timed acquisition that I'm not surprised of. And then to Paul's point, if you're a shareholder, like, this is increasingly becoming a deep pocket game. It's not you have enough money to put a satellite up, you put it up, you need insane amounts of money, and that's just hyperscalers and Elon Musk.
Yeah, and with just a point that you mentioned, Paul, about the about satellite and the expansion of those networks, being to cover areas on Earth that we can't cover on a sort of, by building a tower in a certain area. Would you say that's the primary reason behind it, or is it more to try and act as a backup to some of these terrestrial networks?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, satellites aren't going to deliver indoor coverage, so to speak. We'll have our networks for that, and things like Wi-Fi. But I guess there's an emergency sort of perspective for that. You might be caught somewhere where there's no networks, and you need some help trying to connect to emergency services for people to try and find you. So if you're in like the woods or something, I know Seb's always in the woods. So I mean. It is worth having that extra coverage that you can't build infrastructure everywhere. You just can't, and it doesn't make sense to. If you're not going to have people in certain areas all the time, what's the point in putting something there? Obviously, satellite that's covers wider areas that this infrastructure can't get to. So it makes a lot of sense.
I go to the woods to try and get away from emails and connectivity, and now it's chasing me, so there is no escape. But it's planes as well, it's cruise ships. Those are much more clear business models of those platforms will spend a lot of money to ensure that your BA first class Wi-Fi doesn't drop. And yeah, it is this, how do we have total coverage? You see it with edge deployments of data centers where it's a modular mining rig in the middle of nowhere, or an oil platform. You have some Starlink dishes on that, and soon Amazon Leo dishes.
Yeah,
so
it's
true.
funny as well how we. Sorry, go on, Paul.
Sorry. Yeah, I go back to your point on that, Seb, as well. The Wi-Fi on planes it's dreadful. So actually having these satellite operators trying to invest in this is really useful as well.
Not long before till we can do these broadcasts from planes and annoy everyone around us.
It used to be the nice thing. You'd have like a 10-hour plane flight, and you'd be like, "Oh, I can switch off for a bit at least." No, your emails are still coming through.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I saw Seb dropped in first class BA as well. I didn't know you got first class as well in economy, but, so we can't relate. But it was interesting what you said as well. We've been talking about satellites and what you said, Seb, about it's Elon Musk and hyperscalers, but there's a lot of conversations a couple of weeks at our event in New York came up that even in markets like the US, the lack of internet exchange points in a lot of the states even is quite it's quite telling, And I think generally on that, are we sometimes in danger of looking at the data center world and the markets through that hyperscale lens, when in reality some of the foundational infrastructure needs quite a bit of work?
Yeah, it's just when it comes to space that it's only a big cost game. I mean, down on terrestrial, there was especially early days there was space for interconnection providers who were local, but again, they've all been gobbled up by Equinix. They've all been gobbled up by the big guys, and it's very tough to break into that now. It's a tough time to be getting into the industry, even though there's so much money.
Yeah, yeah. And just Seb, staying with you as well, are there any other sort of particular stories? Because I know your work's a bit more cross-cutting. Anything of interest your end?
Yeah, I mean, the other space one wasn't this month, but is worth keeping an eye on is Blue Origin's TeraWave because that's high throughput. So that's more where you would be looking at kind of interconnection in space, not for individuals, but for enterprise grade and maybe even data centers. But on my end, kind of building on what I talked about last month is just, I spend a lot of time nowadays writing about the generative AI big guys. And you've got this pullback of OpenAI where there's reports that their revenue's not quite hitting, their audience growth's not quite hitting. They're not sure if they're going to have enough money to spend $1.6 trillion, shocker, on compute. So you've seen them pull out of a few things. We talked about a couple of pullouts last time. UK, Norway, slow down in the main Stargate in Abilene. They've had to rework the deal with Microsoft, although this time they're kind of a bit better in their favor that Microsoft doesn't get all the revenue from 2030. So they're at a really interesting point where it's not clear how many of these projects they're actually going to deliver. They've been quite bullish about announcing some of them. Project Freebird in Texas, and they've said, "Look, we're building it." We went through their filings, saw how big it is. It's still just a phase one. How much they're actually committed to do the full multi-billion-dollar project, again, just isn't clear. And you're seeing a very, very different strategy from Anthropic. I mean, those guys hate each other, are constantly sniping at each other quite publicly. And internal OpenAI emails were like, Anthropic's compute constrained. They've guessed this wrong, right? Yes, it's going to be costly right now, but give it a year. We're going to have gigawatts of compute. They're going to have nothing. Our models will then be better. Our availability of those models will be better. And yeah, Anthropic's a few years behind, but to be honest, they're picking up a lot of the contracts and a lot of the hyperscale deals that are coming through. They can just pick it up from that. We scooped that they have started hiring for people for leasing data center space in Europe and Australia. They've hired some really interesting energy people that we've scooped as well. I spent a long time just going through all the hires in Anthropic, and what is insane is the amount of people they've hired from Google. Like the entire Anthropic data center team is just like 90% Google employees, and some pretty big Google hires. And I think they're culture-wise really trying to get that early Google energy of don't do evil, but with an asterisk. Whereas OpenAI is more kind of Palantir vibes at times. But
You're already doing evil.
yeah, it's fine. It's whatever, Department of War, baby. But it's an exciting bit because OpenAI were the only really vocal generative AI data center people. The others we tried to talk to Anthropic a few years ago, and they were like, "It's not us. We're not talking to data centers." Whereas now they're much more open to chatting.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Seb, but I'm getting the feeling that you're saying all these announcements we're seeing, they might not be delivered. Is
Yeah.
that how
So
you see things?
the other story we'd write about is Fermi, who were trying to build a massive data center in Texas. And when they announced, we were like, not everything adds up on experience levels and all of that. Then they went public, despite again not having built anything and just leasing land, and were worth 15 billion, which maybe talks a bit about some of the froth in this industry. They are now -1 CEO and -1 CFO. Still worth billions, but like 80% less than when they IPO'd, and have yet to build a data center. So you're going to see more and more of these projects where if they haven't quite got the team, haven't quite got the land, haven't quite got the experience, or in OpenAI's case, haven't got the money, pull back. But at least we got a shoe company doing AI, so
And I mean, the
It's,
scale of. Oh, sorry, go on,
no,
Charlotte.
I was just going to say it's interesting to see some of the not of some of the pushback from the companies involved in this as well. It feels like Oracle are particularly vocal or particularly like to get on social media when there's been reports that timelines aren't adding up or that perhaps what they've committed to isn't going to kind of match the reality. And they just, love to seem to. Oracle seem to have a social media manager that loves to get on Twitter and be like, no, everything is fine, which is a strategy, I guess. But yeah, the pushback from the industry, OpenAI are doing it a little bit as well. There's again, Seb mentioned reports lately that their revenue is perhaps not what
Yeah.
they'd like it to be, and they just go out there and say it's nonsense. But
Although, so when the OpenAI Abilene Crusoe stuff came out, you saw a lot of Stargate people go, no, these projects aren't delayed. Here's a picture of a different project that's going fine, and then those people no longer work at OpenAI. So Stargate's lost a bunch of people. The heads of Stargate, they've kind of reworked the team, and I think it is again how do we shift the OpEx, the CapEx to OpEx.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you see people push back and say everything's fine, and then they're no longer working at the company a few months later.
well, they're
Not
like
necessarily
construction's
fine.
definitely going ahead, and then it's a photo of like one like beam or something, and you're like, sure.
It's an important beam, you know.
And even on the capex side, the scale of the finance, we've seen a handful of companies essentially create bonds to raise money. We've seen GPUs and used as collateral to finance other build outs when GPUs tend to be not last that long until the next one comes out. So when do you think this potential crunch point's really going to hit? And is there going to be a wave of projects pulled, cancellations? Do you think that's something what's quite
Yeah, I
imminent?
think rather than there being, whenever we talk about bubble, people assume this like dramatic pop, and don't get me wrong, could happen, but it's more like a soft deflating balloon at times. Like you see these pullbacks, you'll see projects that just were originally announced at 1.2 gigawatts, and they announce, hey, our first phase of 300 megawatts is live, and then you just don't. They just quietly don't keep going, so it'd be a lot more quiet. The bond stuff, it's there's only a few companies where they need more debt to pay off the old debt, and they're the ones that will struggle. Whereas if it's you've brought on debt to pay for some infrastructure, it just gets harder, and they stop getting debt for the next one, but they're fine for that one. We have a NeoCloud supplement that's about to launch with like CoreWeave, Iren, Nebius, Nscale, all the people, and we look a bit about the costs and the kind of growing debt pile, because it's a lot.
It can be such a fine balancing act though, because it's not even just kind of the construction of the shell of the data center. I was reading a report today about a company in Pennsylvania that's building a data center or is looking to expand their data center, and they've built it specifically for NVIDIA Vera Rubin hardware. And in this kind of report, it was saying that if NVIDIA's supply chain, like the timeline slips for kind of shipping that, and if it isn't released or they can't get it when they're anticipated to get it, that puts the whole project behind, and that could impact their bottom line because they have built this data center specifically for this hardware. So there's so much to it.
The Crusoe facility that got delayed was for Blackwell, and then OpenAI, well, Blackwell's no longer, where we're putting our eggs. They managed to get Microsoft in. So I chat to Iren about their big Microsoft contract. I think it's like $9 billion, and they raised debt and they got money from Microsoft in a security-backed loan to get the facility through the door, including the GPU. So 95% of the cost of the GPU was debt or Microsoft, and then they're the one just carrying it on their books. So it works if you've got Microsoft as the end payer, because they got money, they'll have money in 10 years. But once the hyperscalers, you go past the hyperscalers and you start going down layers and layers of more febrile, nascent businesses, and it gets a little trickier.
It sounds like a bit of a gamble.
Yeah, it's all a gamble.
Yeah. And it shifts back actually quite nicely to what you said at the start, Charlotte, with the kind of the shift from training to inferencing. Because I suppose if you've got a warehouse in an energy-rich region which has been a data center, and the way the wind's blowing, it's all going to inference. You're kind of stuck with if you're stuck with a warehouse in Idaho, you're going to be caught short a little bit.
It depends, right? There's still big questions about how much actual latency, how much proximity you need. You can do a lot of inference miles away from people for chatbots and stuff. There a lot of these big training facilities will just be reworked as inference facilities because they're no longer big enough for training facilities as well. The training one needs to keep getting bigger and bigger, and needs to be bigger and bigger chips, more energy and more power and more cooling. Whereas the inference ones, theoretically, you can go smaller. But again, that's an unknown. The Grok LPU, they're selling it as a standard NVIDIA rack that is, up to 250 kilowatts.
Yeah. To quote Rumsfeld, it's a known unknown, and I suppose there's plenty of unknown unknowns, isn't there? But I think that's enough of Rummy anyway. So moving on to some of the conversations that you've been having recently, Charlotte, have you had any interesting chats in the last couple of weeks?
Interesting chats in the last couple of weeks.
Within work, I mean.
Yeah. You should have heard what we said before we got on this call, right? That was an interesting chat. So we've got our next issue of the magazine kind of creeping up over the hill. It'll be here before we know it, I guess. A couple of things I'm looking at for that. Firstly, also got an upcoming AI hardware supplement I should also plug. You can find Seb and I in that when it's released. So for that, something I mentioned already is this kind of resurgence of CPUs. So talking to people about that, and again, like the kind of the supply and demand and the challenges there. I've been talking to people as well about gallium nitride. So that's basically alternative material, transistors, things like that. So basically it's to do with lowering power or kind of and reducing loss in chips and things like that. So someone said to me earlier this week that 2026 will be the year of GaN, so is what they call gallium nitride. So look out for that one, I guess.
It made all our chargers better,
Yeah, this is true. So
chargers anymore.
Yeah, so it's currently kind of widely found in things like Seb says, chargers, but also chargers for electric vehicles, things like that. But there's, with kind of the advent of AI and HPC data centers, there's more and more use cases that it's applicable to there. So we're expecting, or people that are focused on that technology are expecting to kind of see that this year, next year, really kind of make a dent. So
the year of GaN. Yeah, we heard it here first. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, so like Charlotte, I'm just looking ahead to the next issue of our magazine, really. So currently working on a feature that examines the dangers of telecom tower climbers, really. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, effectively, and I think most people would agree with that as well, especially in the US and the structures you see, how tall they are. And Seb can testify this. I'm not one for heights. I know we had an open reach day a couple of years ago. I was not going very high up those antenna poles, but he was going quite up those structures. I don't know. He seems to love climbing. I don't know, but the people I've spoken to, quite a lot of them, they do tend to really enjoy climbing. I think that's how a lot of them get into this industry, actually. And they examine the difficulties of the job, the challenging weather conditions in the US that they have to work in several hours a day. I mean, someone was saying that they could be on a tower for up to 24 hours a day at some point, just to try and get networks connected. And it sounds like a very dangerous job. And one that I'm really interested in find out a bit more about actually. So you had some good chats with tower workers, trying to get in touch with some more people for that still. Been a couple of podcasts recorded as well that should be going live in the next few weeks. One with the Wireless Infrastructure Association, just examining the role of telecoms infrastructure and how it will look over the next few years. Really, different needs for different types of infrastructure. Really, we mentioned satellite earlier on, but obviously 5G, fibre, all the different things that sort of pair together, and also a podcast with Sienna as well that examines the role of that they can play in the data center interconnect.
Nice. And Seb, are you expanding the Monday Night Climbing Club or?
I mean, it's good to have a backup job for when writing inevitably fails me. I'd love to be a tower dog up there, scaring Paul.
I won't be joining
It'd be
you.
a lot of fun. No.
We create our
I
own
will
news
not
at
be-
DCD. Seb climbs a
Yeah.
tower, Paul reports it.
Yeah, well, it's always good to have a backup. So if anyone out there is hiring, let me know. No, I've had quite kind of interesting to the point of what you're asking, James, about the cracks in the edifice that is all of this is the amount of people now I'm getting reaching out to me and saying, hey, I saw you write about Fermi or Allbirds or whatever. How should I be concerned? And then you look at them and they're like a major investor with a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, and you're like, well, you should have thought about this a little earlier. Or data center operators coming to me and asking about it. So that's been a huge one. To quote Condoleezza Rice, people may oppose you, but when they realize you can hurt them, they'll join your side. Who else on the we got any Bush quotes? But looking to the future, I have too many trips. Irish government have invited me to tour a bunch of the semiconductor fabs in Ireland. So I'm going Cork, Limerick, Dublin. Then we have our lovely sister business, DCN, have an event in Milan where I shall eat spaghetti and have fun. And then the week after, I'm off to Computex in Taiwan. So I shall not be sleeping, but I shall be having fun with chips.
No, I think the first class tickets have beds.
Oh, I
you can
wish.
get a bit of
Yeah.
can't you? Yeah. What about you, Charlotte? Have you got any sort of travel planned?
Yeah, I think May's going to be a bit of a busy month for the editorial team. There's one week where don't expect to see any news because I think half the team are out on various corners of the planet. So yeah, personally, I'm going to Dell World next month in Vegas. I'm very excited. My first time in Vegas since post-pandemic, I believe. So yeah, see what they're kind of going to talk about there. I think they've told me they've got compute and storage announcements, which are obviously very exciting for myself. And I'm also going to DCD's APAC event in Bali in June. So if you are coming along to that, I shall be there. So come say hi. I'm very excited for that one. It's my first Bali trip. And
Nice. Yeah, I think that's in high demand in the DCD team, isn't it?
yeah, we had to fight for a place.
Yeah. Paul, are you going and climbing any towers anywhere or?
I won't be climbing any towers anywhere, unfortunately. No immediate plans for me next month. I'm sure. I think I'm one of the only ones that will be sticking around the office while these
Spawn the
are
home
away
front.
next month. So yeah, I mean, a couple of events earlier this year, but I'm sure there'll be more of the summer and more the later half of this year as well. In fairness, yeah, plenty happening in the telco world. But yeah, I'll be holding the fort in the office probably next month in these guys' absence.
Yeah.
Paul will be picking up the slack across all the channels.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe.
Telco and the rest, yeah. So I suppose on that, actually, like with we're in such a fast changing industry. Are there any, with your ear to the ground, are you hearing any whispers of any big announcements that we haven't covered coming up in the next few weeks? Paul, do you want to take a stab at that first?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen reports of the Deutsche Telekom and potential T-Mobile merger. I mean, that would be massive if it happens. Both companies have sort of since come out. Bloomberg initially reported it, but both companies have since come out and said that they're not commenting on speculation. Deutsche Telekom own a 53% stake in T-Mobile, so there would be a lot of parts that moving parts to this for that to actually happen. It's obviously cross border consolidation. The US and Germany. So it's a very I can't really think of many sort of deals that size really in the telecoms world. So it'd be interesting how that happens, or if it does happen. I don't think it's the last we've heard of it. So I think it will be interesting to just keep an eye on that really. And the US telcos, what I do know is they're very very big on fibre at the moment, as they've all sort of pushed that out this week. T-Mobile yesterday announcing 2 fibre JVs. They're investing 2.7 billion across the two of them. So that much I do know is happening, that they are going very much on their fibre at the moment.
Yeah. Seb, anything you're expecting on your travels?
Yeah, well, it's hard to, you're asking us to what scoops we're working on, what we're going to announce here live, but I'm very excited to see the various developments around the world in my endless travels. But to quote George Bush, I believe the humanity and the fish can coexist peacefully. The other thing we're really excited about is all these waterborne or underwater data centers. China's obviously been doing it a long time. The West kind of burned their feet with Natic, but you're seeing a few new startups here. We are trying to visit some of them. Paul, if you're scared of heights, what about you at diving? Can we send you underwater?
I'll give it a go. I mean, I don't mind swimming.
There we go.
Diving.
Perfect. I've got my fish on. I'm ready.
Always prepared.
Always prepared.
Yeah, I think going 50 feet. Yeah, I think going 50 feet down is probably better than going 50 feet up. So, and then last but not least, Charlotte, anything you're expecting over the next few weeks?
Oh, it's so hard to predict the future, James. But I think something to watch out for, Seb touched upon it at the kind of top of the episode, is now Microsoft and OpenAI have kind of rejigged their kind of agreement. I just think see how that kind of, not the fallout, but kind of how that plays out, and how OpenAI kind of move on from there and start announcing. I assume they're going to start announcing more and more deals with other companies. So they had an exclusivity agreement that is now no longer in place. So OpenAI have already announced a deal with Amazon, I think it is, since the Microsoft conscious uncoupling happened. So I just think see what else kind of falls that way.
And then the other exciting thing is today, when we're recording it, marks 1 year since we acquired SDX Central. So to quote Dick Cheney, we will in fact be greeted as liberators. And it's very nice to have expanded that team, expanded that output, and then we'll work together so their coverage helps inform our coverage helps inform their coverage. We all get better at writing about what is an incredibly complex and ever-moving topic, so it's very nice.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you very much for your guys' time. I'll have to leave you to go and sort all your visas out, apart from you, Paul. But yeah, well, thank you everyone at home for watching as well. If anyone has any thoughts or insights on anything we've discussed today, please do reach out to either Charlotte, Seb, Paul, or myself. We're always looking for industry input and how we put our content out. So this will also be available on
Scoops.
Shortly. Yeah, and scoops. The extra points for scoops. Yeah. All right. But well, thank you everyone, and thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.